Good evening, everyone. Professor Jones here. I hope everyone has started to get comfortable with using your pattern making tools, and with the draft of the front and back bodice that you have started to get familiar with the drafting terms, and also with the tools you need every time you start to draft a pattern. Okay, so we're going to get started. Today I'm just going to show you a quick way to draft the front and back skirt. Now, there are several ways again to do this. You can draft them both at the same time, or you can draft them one at a time. I prefer to draft them both at the same time, and there's several ways to do that. I find that this is a basic way just to give you an idea of what measurements you're using. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is of course gather my tools and then gather my measurements. And so for this measurement, if you're doing a custom measurement or using your dress form, you should already have in mind with a basic sloper that you're going to make other patterns from this. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you know how long you want your skirt to be. And it's not important that you have it super long, because you can take this pattern and make other patterns from it. For me, I'm going to let this skirt be just an inch shorter than the length of my paper, which is going to be really short. It's going to be about 18, actually about 17 inches, because I want to leave a little bit of space up at the top. Okay, so once you have your length and you have your waist measurement divided by 4, you have your hip measurement divided by 4, you have your hip depth, that is the measurement taken from your waist down to the fullest part of your hip, your waist depth, and you have those measurements, then you are ready to start. The only other thing you have to be concerned with is your custom dart intake. And if you are using the text, there's a chart in the book that gives you a starting point for dart intake. You can use the 1 inch and then make the sample and then do the adjustment on the form, or you can use the difference between the waist and the hip and add, it depends on if it's a really curvy figure, there's a way you can do that too. So let's just keep it basic today. I'm going to use the difference between the waist and the hip, and basically I'm just going to probably add just a 1 inch dart, just so I can show you guys how this goes. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is what I always do, is give myself a guideline about a 1/2 inch down from the top of the page, and that's going to be my waistline. So I'm going to make sure that I have the edge of my paper straight there, and I'm going to use my ruler and just give myself a straight line here. And again, this is the top, and then down here again, I said my skirt length is going to be about 17 inches. Here's 17 here, so I'm going to give myself another line here. Now, I'm going to come back up here to the waistline and measure down and mark my hip depth. But before I do that, I want to point something out to you so you'll know exactly where we are. I'm sure you know this is the top, this is the bottom of my skirt. This is the center front of my skirt. Okay, so I'm going to put CF here. So this is you know, when we're drafting a pattern, we are only drafting for 1/4 of the body. So this is the, what would be the the right side of the skirt, and this is the center of the body, the center front. Okay, so now I'm going to measure down my hip depth. Now generally from the waist down to the fullest part of the hip on the average woman is between 6 and 9 inches. I'm going to use 6 inches. Okay, so if I measure down to, I'm going to use, here we go, yeah, I'm going to use about 6.5. I forgot my dress form is what I'm using getting these measurements from, and she does not have a really defined full hip line, so here we're going to use 6.5. Okay, so now I'm going to square a line across the page, and I'll write here that this is the hip line. Okay, so now I've got my hip line, and so now I'm going to take my hip measurement, which I should already have done, divide it by 4, and I'm going to mark it on my hip line. The hip line measurement I'm using is 40. So 40 divided by 4 is going to be 10, and I'm going to add a 1/2 inch ease to that. So I'm actually going to make it, remember when you add ease to each part of the, if you don't add it at the beginning to the whole measurement, like to the 40 inches, and you add it to each piece, remember if I add a 1/2 inch to each piece of the pattern, then I'm going to end up with what, an extra 2 inches on the whole pattern. We don't want that. So if I'm just trying to add a little bit of ease here, I'm going to add like maybe 1/4 inch ease here at the hip line. So I'm going to add 10 1/4 here. The hip line divided by 4 plus 1/4 inch ease. Okay, so once I have that, I'm going to square a line straight up to the waistline, right at that point, straight up to the waistline. I'm also going to square a line at this point straight down to the hemline. Okay, I'm just making sure that my ruler is straight. A little bit. Okay. All right. So I've got my hip line, and so now I'm going to go up to the waistline, and remember that's my center front. So I'm going to be sure to come over to, if that's the center front, then this is the side seam. So if you think you're going to get confused, you can go ahead and write that this is the side seam. All right, so now I'm going to come up here to my waistline. My waistline is going to be 30. So I'm going to 30 divided by 4. Okay, so there's a 10-inch difference between my hip line and my waistline. So I have to do 30 divided by 4, and I have to add enough for the dart intake. So I'm going to do basically the same thing, but here, instead of adding the ease in, I'm going to add my dart, so I'm not going to add ease. Okay, so that would be 7.5, but I'm measuring from the center front. Okay, so if I was only adding just the division by 4, I would be at 7.5. So let's just take it one step at a time. So 30 divided by 4, that would be 7.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. Okay, that's what it would be without the dart intake. All right. Now, if I add a 1-inch dart, then it would be, of course, 8.5. But that is if we're going to just go ahead and add our 1-inch dart, and we're not doing a custom fit. If I was doing a custom fit and I had a really curvy, like there's a 10-inch difference here, to me there's a really curvy customer, what I would do is subtract the 2, so I know I've got 10 inch difference. If I was looking at just, if I really broke it down, I would say, well, this is 10 inches, and now this is 7. 10 minus 7 is going to be 3, so I've got a 3-inch difference here. So if I divide that 3 into 2, then what I could do, what I'm trying to do here is end up, so I have 2 darts here, and the third part of that would be here. So just think about it like this. I'm putting, this is not going to be a dart, but I'm going to go in a little bit here because I've got a curvy person here. So either one way or the other, I'm going to have a curve here. So if I know I've got a difference of 3 inches, and I want to have a 1-inch dart here, a 1-inch dart here, okay, then I know I can go in 1 inch here, right? So if I go in, that will be 3. So if I go in 1 inch here on the side seam, okay, and then I draw a line, just a little light line, because this is my curved line here, believe it or not. So I'm just going to draw a little line there. Okay, so I've come in my 1 inch, okay, and then now I'm going to take what I have left, okay, I'm going to measure this, and I turn it the other way, and define the center point, and do some division here so that I can find the dart placement. Okay, so once I measure this, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 9.25. Okay, so if I do that, then I have 9.25. And this is why I always usually have my soft measuring tape around my neck, so I don't have to do any math. Here's my soft measuring tape sitting right here waiting for me to use it. So if I take this, my 9.25 here, and I fold it in half, okay, there's my 9.25, fold it in half there. Got my halfway point without doing any math really. Okay, so that's my halfway point. Okay, so now that I have that halfway point, I want to find out where I'm going to put my darts, because this is just a halfway point. And I'll tell you what it's good for is if I'm going to have to do any kind of slash and spread later on to do some designing with the pattern. So I'll take this and go ahead and just draw a light line. This can be my grain line as well. So I'm just going to just take this and make a light line down the pattern. Okay, so now back here. So now I'm going to measure the distance between these 2 points and these 2 points here, because I want to find a place to put my my darts. Remember, there was a 3-inch difference between the hip measurement and a 3-inch difference between the waist. So what I'm going to do is that left me with 3 inches, and so I went in on the side seam 1 inch, and now I'm going to take up the rest of that extra fabric that would be here, that excess that would be here at the waist, in darts. So 2 1-inch darts. So what I'm going to do is measure 1 inch away from the front here. I think I'm going to do, I got a good little piece here. I'm going to do 2.5 and put my dart there. And then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing so I don't have my darts. You can do 1.5 inches or 1 inches for your darts, so your darts aren't right up on top of one another. If your darts were any smaller than 1.5, I would say that you could go ahead and well, let's see if we got 1.5. We got about 2 inches here. I'm going to go ahead and do it that way. So I measured this, and I had about 4.5, and I want to put about 1.5 inches between my darts. So here, that's about 4.5. So I marked 2.5, which is the halfway point here, and this is going to be the midpoint for one of my darts, the middle leg. So let me go ahead, and these darts are going to be 3.5 and 4.5. Okay, so here this is going to be my 3.5 inch dart. Okay, make sure that's 3.5, and then I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on each side, because that will give me 1 inch. Okay, I'll go ahead and connect those. Get my first dart. Okay, and then I'm going to measure 1.5 inches away from there. And see where I'm at? 1.5 inches away from there, I'm at my center point here, and that's where I'm going to put my dart, right on our grain line here. Well, I'm calling it the grain line. It's a good place for a grain line. So here I'm going to put a mark on each side, and this dart is going to be a little bit longer. That one was 3.5. This is going to be 4 inches. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 inches. I put 1/2 inch on each side. And no worries, I'm going to go back and review all of the steps here. Okay, so now I've got my 2 darts. I've gone in here, and my pattern is just about done except for a few things. Here I'm going to, this is my side seam, I'm going to go up 1/2 inch. We all know that we aren't straight up on the side like this, right? So I'm going to go up 1/2 inch here and mark. Okay, I'm going to mark up 1/2 inch. I'm going to extend this 1/2 inch, and then my dart, I'm going to go up 1/8. Okay, just a little bit, because I don't want to have I know that we aren't built flat like paper. Okay, and then I'm going to take this right up here to the front. Okay, so now it's time for me to do something. Use my hip curve ruler. Okay, so the first place I'm going to use it is right here. Okay, now it's just like any other ruler. You can turn it around, use it any way you want to use it, any way that you feel like it's going to work best for you. Now there's not a really huge curve that I want to make here, but I want it to be a nice curve, so I'm going to move it until it works for what I'm trying to do here, and then I'm going to draw in my side seam. Okay, all right, and then I'm going to take it, and I'm going to make sure that I've got it here, and just blend down my waistline so that it makes sense here. Okay, and just bring this where these both touch. Oops, where these both. And I'll have to go back and true up my lines here, but that's the basics of it. Okay, so now this is a basic pattern for a basic skirt. Okay, again, there's lots of different ways you can do this. The only difference between this and the back pattern is going to be, number one, the length of the darts. Okay, the dart length in the back of your on back patterns are longer than the darts in the front. Okay, and for a lot of reasons, well, a few reasons. One of them is that, you know, we really don't want to have, it's unappealing to have a super long dart in the back of your garments. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a review so I can show you what I did, because I know I was took some twists and turns in there. Okay, so the first thing I did was I took the measurements I had to have were my waist divided by 4, my hip divided by 4 plus a 1/4 inch ease. Okay, and my hip depth, DIPTH, and also had to have my desired length. Usually that is about 23 to 26 inches for a basic skirt like this. I used, mine was a little bit shorter because of the length of my paper here. Okay, now these are the measurements that you need. Then the first thing I did was to mark the top of my pattern, my waist, and to mark my hemline, the bottom of my skirt. The next thing I did was to measure down my hip depth. Okay, so after I marked my hip depth down here, I squared a line across my hip divided by 4 plus a 1/4 inch ease. After I did that, I squared a line up to the waist and down to the bottom. Okay, after I did that, then I came up to the top here and extended this line a 1/2 inch. Okay, 1/2 inch. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. The next thing I did was went to the waistline. So squared a line straight up and down, and then we decided that the difference between the hip measurement, after we did our division, after we divided them both by 4, the difference between the waist and the hip was 10 inches. Okay, the difference was 10 inches. So if we subtract the difference was 3 inches. I'm gonna write that on here. So okay, so the difference between the hip line and the waistline was 3 inches, because once we divided the hip, it was 10 1/4 with the ease. The waist was 7 1/2. Okay, so we ended up with an extra 3 inches or so here. Okay, so when we ended up with that extra 3 inches, that meant that it would fit here at the hip, but if we didn't have darts, we would have an excess of 3 inches up here at the waist. So we had to do something about that. Well, we couldn't just have a big 3-inch dart, right? We couldn't just grab up 3 inches and just sew up a big unappealing dart. So we decided that what we would do is divide this 3 inches up, okay, by 3. Okay, and that gave us 3 1-inch darts. All right, Now, the way we did it was, even though this is not going to be a dart we sew up, this is a little trick that you can do. Again, when you have a real customer versus a bust form, a dress form, if you have a really curvy customer, this works very well, is to measure in 1 inch. Okay, and so now this is no longer a part of your pattern at 1 inch, and then you're going to measure over and mark your waist divided by 4 plus 2 inches for your 2 darts. Okay, in order to figure out where my darts were going to be placed, I measured in from this point to this point. So I had to figure out where the halfway point is, because I want this to be also my grain line. Okay, so I can go ahead and put that in real quick while we're talking. Okay, so I put in my grain line. So the dart placement was, the first dart was at the halfway point here, between here and here. And then I went 1.5 inches between these 2 points, and of course that put me here, and that was my second dart. This dart is 3.5 inches long. This dart here is 4 inches long. The difference between the front and the back pattern pieces are the length of the dart. Okay, now I could have, instead of doing what we did with getting the custom dart measurement here, I could have just said, okay, I'm going to just go over here after I marked the hip up and down. I could have measured over 7.5 plus 1 inch. That would have been 8.5, and just put in a dart, a 1 inch dart. And then once I put it on the person, I would have done the adjustment on the muslin. So I would have cut it out, put it on the form, and then I would have seen, oh, okay, this is way too big, I need to add another dart. And then I would have pinned that extra dart up, and then came back to the table and made a new pattern. But because I've been doing this for a while, I can tell when there's a big difference between those two, that you have to have 2 darts. I can tell that before I cut it out of the muslin and put it on the person. Okay, if you have any questions, as usual, please make sure you put them in the email, and I will be glad to answer them for you. Also, I'll see you at our class on Thursday, and I can answer any questions you have. Go ahead and try to draft this pattern this way. Look at your text and try to do it the way that it is in the text. Watch the videos of the 2 ladies I have who have been doing this successfully for years. They are great pattern masters, and notice the things that do not change. Notice the tools they use, and also notice how they decide that they're going to show you how to do it. Some people use numbers, some people use letters, point A to point B and such. Again, I like for you to actually vision the part of the body that we are trying to draft the pattern piece for. Okay? All right, Professor Jones signing off here. I hope you have a great pattern making day, and I will be back to show you some other things again real soon. Take care.